to you by Pfizer.
In this video, you're going to see the future.
U.S. Treasury is higher.
Breaking news. We've got a livestock there.
Hello, welcome to a very special edition of Stay Free with Russell Brand at the RNC. Over the course of the next hour, we're going to be joined by a carnival of extraordinary guests. But will we ever retain the heights of this moment now with Charlie Kirk, who quite literally is a towering individual? Charlie, it's lovely to be with you today.
Someone said that I was part of the Nephilim, which is the old giant people that used to...
Those giants, I think they carried, from what I've read in Scripture, they carried on in a saucy way.
That's correct, yes.
They made off with the daughters of man.
In Genesis 5, I believe it says that. Maybe earlier, Genesis 3, maybe.
They were right there in the middle of Genesis.
That's right.
Those great towering giants. Mate, how have you found this RNC so far, and how do you manage the inevitable sort of sense that there are power games and power wrangles, and sometimes the sense of the corruption that is tempting for partisan figures, which I figure that you are to a degree, to cast onto opponents, but not easily acknowledge when it's happening within your own institution?
Well, look, I mean, right now we see the party more unified than ever. And, I mean, as far as, you know, myself personally, just trying to stay sane in the midst of all of it. You know, it's really amazing, though, to see J.D. Vance become vice president last evening was a refutation of the Bush-Cheney warmongering nonsense, and seeing that on full display. Because the Republican Party was the party of war my entire life.
Yeah.
Since I was born in 1993, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, and to have someone get on the main stage and say, yeah, we're not going to engage in endless wars, and we will use our strength when necessary, but the Iraq War was a mistake. I mean, that is a recalibration, Russell, the likes of which that we could not have predicted, let alone 5 years ago.
It's actually a recalibration that goes beyond the party politics of the Republican Party, in a sense, a reframing of what the left and the liberal left sees itself as. There's no refuting at this point that the military-industrial complex Dem Party is the party of war.
That's
Nevertheless,
correct.
although I met J.D. Vance, albeit briefly, and I thought he seemed like a pretty sort of spectacular guy.
He's wonderful.
Plus his history and stuff. I mean, it's difficult not to get excited by that. But I wonder if you too believed for a moment that there was a possibility that RFK might get this sort of unifying position as VP.
I never thought that was seriously in contention. I like RFK a lot. I like how many votes he's taken from Democrats right now. So, but I think that he's done some great work with medical freedom, individual autonomy. But look, I don't think that was ever probably in serious contention. I will say, though, I would not be surprised if RFK has a role in the administration.
Because it does indeed.
I'm going to be pushing for that, by the way.
Yeah,
I want to see
for that.
I said this on your show previously.
Yeah, you did. We talked about it.
And so I've said this to the president, and I'm going to say it again. I think that RFK should chair a special blue ribbon commission, an actual one, not a fake one, into childhood vaccination schedule.
Excuse me,
I think we have to share a mic, Dan.
We're in the,
Oh, you're
we're in
good?
the business of actually.
No, you're
we're
good.
trying to get viewers, Dan. The last thing we need is you sidling on here. We're trying to cultivate an audience.
Brother, man, I'm telling you, you are like such an electric personality. You got like an energy about you, man. It's hard to, right, Charlie?
I mean,
it's like he's infectious. Like you walk in a room and it's like, boom, pow, kicking the balls, man. It's freaking amazing. Like, where do you get that from?
I have been accused of being infectious before, but not in precisely that manner, Dan Bongino, and I will take that as an extraordinary compliment for you.
It is,
I
brother.
must say, it's been a particular marvel to share this space with you, albeit sometimes distracting, because you yourself are not devoid of incredible presence. And if I can just remind you of one thing that you said earlier today, obviously all of us now at this Republican convention are living in the immediate aftermath of this extraordinary historical event that will be unpacked perhaps for generations. And what was astonishing was to hear you when people in your audience, our audience, because to a degree we share an audience here as Rumble creators who have a great appetite for conspiracy. And when there are as many anomalies as there evidently were in the events of Butler, there is an appetite for people to be told, this involves deep state conspiracy. And I thought the way that you handled that was extremely disciplined and elegant, and it involved a deployment of journalistic integrity that our collective many detractors would deny that you have. Could you just tell me once again, like, what your position on that was, Dan, when people are saying, all these anomalies, the ladder, the going around with a scanner and scoping the place out, there must be deep state involvement. How come you took such a strong position against that idea?
Well, for 3 days now, a couple folks in my chat, and it was limited, but it was a few. There were people saying, you know, Dan, you know, why don't you just say it? You know, this is an inside job. And you heard me screaming because I said, no, I don't know that. And I don't say shit I can't back up. Could it be an inside job given this? Absolutely. Do I have evidence to back that up? If I did, I'd put it out on my show. Russell, listen, I am not ever going to be a leftist. I'm not going to be Adam Schiff and go on TV. Charlie, you saw it. I've got evidence of a Russian conspiracy. Let's see it, bro. Well, I don't really have it, but it's there. I promise. I'm never going to do that. Listen, I don't trust the government. I had a question authority bumper sticker on my car when I was in college. I never have. I've always been a conservatarian. But I only say things on my show that I can back up. And suggesting I was somehow like hiding information because I knew it was an inside job is insane. If evidence materializes that's the case, I'll put it out. But when you burn your integrity with the audience and say shit you can't back up and you put it out on Twitter, look, I got evidence, and then they click and they realize you're full of shit, your audience goes down and down and down. It is important, Russell, not to be first, but to be right. And I am only going to say stuff I can back up. And if I'm speculating, you will hear me say it. This is speculation based on said evidence, but I haven't drawn a conclusion. You're only going to get that on the right, not on the left.
That is an incredible and important point. As the Republican movement transitions, presumably, from opposition to power, there will be a new degree of rigor required. And many of the things that, much of the proselytization, many of the projections, and much of the conjecture will now have to be deployed in an administration. And that kind of integrity that you're able to deploy as a journalist, as an outsider, is going to be important, isn't it? If this is presumably, Charlie, a movement now towards government, how do you think Trump will fare if indeed he becomes the ultimate authority in American politics?
Well, first, we have to keep him alive because his safety is not secure, in my personal opinion. We have no guarantees the Secret Service in its current form or fashion can actually protect his safety. And I say this, the Secret Service director won't even talk to lawmakers. And so we have to keep him alive and J.D. Vance alive from now till November and even beyond that. And so, but yes, as far as governing goes, I mean, look, this is why the J.D. Vance pick is so important, is that back in 2016, there was a backdoor behind Trump for the intel agencies and for the deep state forces to be able to manipulate the government through Mike Pence and through other advisors around Donald Trump. That was walled off last night. Last night, you saw that Donald Trump's presidency will not have a backdoor to the Central Intelligence Agency, the Department of Justice, against the wishes of Donald Trump. J.D. Vance is completely consistent with the worldview of Donald Trump. In fact, he is, I think, the most articulate spokesperson of that agenda, especially when it comes to ending these stupid, endless wars, putting America first and exploring American energy, restricting mass migration, and finally questioning some of these stupid trade deals. Mike Pence was much more of a neoliberal that was in that position. In fact, I'll tell you a true story. This was reported on, but people don't know it as well as they should. Donald Trump wanted to leave Afghanistan the right way. He wanted to get out of Afghanistan. It was a campaign promise, a campaign pledge. And he didn't want to do it like Joe Biden, leaving $90 billion of equipment. But he said, this is too long of a war. We must put Americans first. Mike Pence assembled a private rehearsal meeting the night before that Donald Trump was going to make the final decision with all of his Secretary of Defense cabinet. At the time, it was Mad Dog Mattis, and he had Rex Tillerson, and Mike Pence assembled the entire team, and he said, I'll play Donald Trump. Let's rehearse how this meeting's going to go.
I'm disappointed to hear.
Oh, no, and Mike Pence was like, here's what Trump's going to say, and then you guys say this next, and then you guys say this next, manipulating. So Trump walks into this meeting with his cabinet, having everyone there rehearsed of move A, move B, move C, move D.
I'm very disappointed in particular at Mad Dog Malice, who with a name like that, you'd think you'd be able to rely on. Now, what about, like, hey, Dan, you know that clip that's going around everywhere of Chuck Schumer saying, if you transgress against the deep state,
6 ways to Sunday.
You better run.
Yeah. That was mid-January 2017.
All right, Charlie, we're all aware of your position on the spectrum.
Okay, all right.
Calm down, Charlie.
Okay.
You great data receptacle.
All right.
But it is good. It's an incredible ability, isn't it, that Charlie has? I'm really seeing
He's
people's
a talented radio
here.
guy. No, he's very
he's
talented.
gifted. I mean, he's
Sometimes
extraordinary.
he beats me in the podcast charts. I'm very
I don't like
capitalist,
that.
right?
No, we're
Charlie?
very competitive.
I sent him a text. I'm like, "You gonna be sick tomorrow or something?" So I can like put out, I put your ass down a few spots.
Don't start any conspiracy theories on this show. We're here only for evidence-based information.
That's right. Yes,
Dan
sir.
Bongino, even though you've said what you said, presumably about an ongoing fealty to the men and women that serve in the services with which you have long been associated, that you don't want to involve in conjecture that is dispiriting, harmful, and plainly untrue for people that dedicate their lives to what they believe in.
Yeah.
What do you feel it means when someone like Chuck Schumer says, if you mess with a deep state, as Charlie remembered, as he probably does everything that's been said in this conversation, if we dropped a box of matches, Charlie would know how many there were on the floor without counting them. I wonder what you think about the Chuck Schumer thing. What does he mean? And is this, when people talk about the deep state and the power of the deep state, and when Trump said the first time round, drain the swamp, do you think that in invective like that, that there is a real fear in that? Is there something you can speculate on without transgressing the views that you articulated so well earlier?
Yeah, having worked in the Secret Service, we were never gatherers of intelligence, and it's for an obvious reason. If I'm protecting Charlie and say he's the president of some country somewhere, he doesn't want us gathering intelligence. He's not going to let us protect him. He's going to say, hey, keep your distance. I don't want you hearing my conversations. But what we do is we consume intelligence, because if I am protecting Charlie or Russell or whatever, I'm going to get the CIA and others to give us a brief and say, hey, I can't say this publicly, but here's what's happening with Russell's, the threat level behind the scenes. So being a 12-year consumer of the highest levels of intelligence, yes, the deep state is real. And I want to give a hat tip here. One of the best commentators out there, I know you know him, is Mike Benz. If you ever want commentary on he's just the best. But he explains this better than anyone. I wrote this in a couple of books, that the deep state has been basically at war with the American political system for a long time. And it's not just the standard players, like, people in the CIA or whatever, some, not all, of course, but they work through various carve-outs and entities, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and those are the people where there's a lot of influence. Matter of fact, if you look at what happened in Ukraine pre-war, you'll find out that, as just a quick example of how the deep state works, there was a pro-European side of Ukraine, a pro-Russia side. Pretty simple. A versus B. Yeah. One side wanted one thing, one side wanted the other thing. So what they did is a bunch of non-governmental organizations on the ground went and hired former bureaucrats and former politicians who were old members of the state. That's why I don't like the term deep state. I call it, it's more like the blob, like Benz calls it, because they're not all state actors. And what they'll do is, these are people who have contacts in the state and use them and leverage them, but are on the outside getting paid, so they have none of the accountability. So Russell, the deep state, you have the worst of both worlds. You have people with connections inside the government to make your life, and my life miserable, but they have none of the, in fact, accountability where we can get them fired because they did something outside of their governmental role. That's really what the deep state is, and Ben's just gloriously explains it in every video. Yeah,
he's so articulate, Mike Benz. He's like the manner in which he's able to reference accurate data and portray the kind of corruption and the kind of an international level of dread. It's an ability that's almost comparable to yours, Charlie, as a receptacle of information, holding it all together. Now, one of the things you were saying just before Dan graced us with his incredible presence, which I'm still basking in somewhat, was that the Republican Party is more united than it's ever been. Yes. So there are no obstacles, outside of the kind of nefarious things to which have been alluded and have recently been experienced to the ascent of Donald Trump. How do you imagine this time round the ascendant political power of Trump will contend with the kind of state power, deep state power, blob power, use whatever term you want, once in office.
Yeah, so you have the second term is going to be a lot different than the first. First of all, personnel is policy, and there are some really great people that are going to be going into this government. Secondly, J.D. Vance is going to be keeping the eyes on the federal government every single day when President Trump might be handling higher level type of diplomatic issues. Look, President Trump's agenda day one is going to be securing the border, ending the war in Ukraine, ending the war in Gaza, and making sure that we have our commitment to Israel. That's like the first week or two. Under the current, though, we need to build a government, put cabinet secretaries in, and also we have a looming list of like 50 or 60 immediate reforms and firings that need to happen. There's a reform called Schedule F that allows you to fire federal employees at will. But there's also a 1960s era act that allows the President of the United States, it's the President Reassignment Act, I'm getting the name wrong, but it's something of that sort, that essentially allows, if there's duplication in government, the President can merge agencies or officials together. No one knows this exists. Vivek told me about this, and I went and did all the research on it. It's amazing. So, for example, if there is duplicative type of work happening in the federal government, in the Department of Education, and also maybe in the Department of Interior, or Department of Interior, Department of Energy, you can then merge government agencies together and effectively sunset and end them. Now, it'll be challenged in court, but it's pretty clear that the executive branch has far more power than people realize. And there needs to be an immediate message, if President Trump were to win and take office in the first couple of weeks, that every bureaucrat is worried that they might be next. That there needs to be volleys and salvos of firings and terminations, and this needs to continue for quite some time. And then, yeah, look, again, it comes down to the human beings that actually execute the policy as well.
Do you know that? Thank you very much. That's so beautifully explained, but I'd expect nothing less from you, Charlie. You're an astonishing man. Now, listen, we have to leave YouTube right now. So if you're watching us on YouTube, there's a link in the description. Click that. Join us on Rumble. After all, we are Rumble creators, the three of us. And we need you to join us there because, well, Dan, who knows what further illuminations await us from that direction. Charlie could be turning verbal pirouettes at any moment now. And I get the sense that there's information that these two men are not willing to tell me while we're still on a platform like YouTube that regulates in the manner that it does, is a member of the TNI, and is ultimately part of the systems that constrain our freedom. Click the link in the description and join us in that sweet stream of freedom that we call Rumble with some of the best.